Hi, my name is Aliyah, and for my English 330 class on Chaucer, I'm going to be explaining medieval astrology. We have a lot to cover today, so whenever you hear know that is either an extra source or more information that I want you to have about the topic, so keep a lookout for that sound, and without further ado, let's get started. So, before we begin talking about astrology and how it works in the medieval world, we have to understand their attitudes around astrology at the time. So Chaucer was alive in the 14th century, and as such they lived in a very superstitious time. It was very kind of an anything goes society, so everything from alchemy to witchcraft was considered just like fair game and had a real effect on people's lives. And that goes as far as to include astrology, which a lot of medieval people believe truly did have some sort of mystical effect over how they lived and what they were able to do in their lives. As such, astronomy was a very difficult topic to discuss. This author believed that we owed Chaucer many astrological paraphrases that did not become popular until the 15th century. So big up to Chaucer for giving us that. Chaucer himself was also very into the science of the stars, astronomy, and he wrote a book called The Treatise on the Astrolabe, where he discussed his findings in astronomy and in the stars. And I'll talk about astrology. You might ask where God is in our discussion. First, by that we have to understand that the church at the time was using a lot of astrology to bring people into the vineyard of the Lord. This phrase means a wise man will dominate the stars. And that was actually a long standing belief by many contemporaries of Chaucer, as well as many religious officials. A friend of Chaucer's, John Gower, took this phrase to mean that a man could overcome his base instincts that were being affected by the stars and be a better person. St. Bonaventure saw the stars as a means of expressing a man's relationship with eternity, rather than as a manifestation of paganism. Also, John Gower believed that if miracles such as Daniel and the lion's den or the parting of the Red Sea could happen, those are clear indicators that the elements will be obedient to a God-fearing man. So there's a lot of the ideas of God in astrology. And now we have a pretty thorough understanding of what medieval people thought about the stars. Now let's get into how they actually work. The medieval model of the stars was very geocentric, and by that we mean that the Earth was the center of the universe and all other heavenly bodies flowed around it. These are actually called the spheres of the universe, of which there are 7. In these 7 spheres, they are all moving at different speeds, but they're all moving in the same direction. And how we order these spheres with how close to or far away they are from Earth is by how fast they are moving through our universe. So the moon is the fastest sphere that moves through our universe, so therefore it is considered the closest to Earth, and Saturn is the slowest sphere in our universe, and so therefore it's considered the furthest away from Earth. As such, here is the order of the 7 spheres of the geocentric universe. They go in this order: Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, the Sun, Venus, Mercury, and lastly the Moon. You also might have noticed that certain planets have different alignment when they're combined with other planets. This is just because when the spheres are moving through the universe, they are in alignment with other planets, and those planets' attributes have a deep effect on the way they interact with people, if that makes sense. So basically, when you look at the stars, you have to think about where each planet is in alignment with another planet to decide exactly how that's going to affect human life and affect human fate. And now that we have those in order, let's talk about the planetary hours. So, at the time that Chaucer was alive, there was really no fixed set of thinking about time. Oftentimes there was a really big discrepancy in between what people thought of as day and what people thought of as nighttime. And so we had the planetary hours as a way of separating these two ideas. Chaucer and his contemporaries who used this system divided the entire a cycle of a day into 12 hours on an analog clock, and from that each hour has a designated planet that is the ruler of that hour. And as such, every ruler of that hour has different attributes. So say we are working on a Friday, right? And so Friday is ruled by the goddess Venus. And Venus is typically the goddess of love and fertility. So say that you're trying to have a baby, or you're trying to shoot your shot with that person that you care about. You will want to wake up at the moment of sunrise on a Friday and pray to Venus that she may look kindly upon you. But if you don't feel like waking up at such an ungodly hour, you can wait until Venus's hour circles around again, and maybe that's a good time to like slide into their DMs. Or maybe that's a time like to start about family planning or anything along those lines that would be connected to Venus. And even when we think about like the days of the week, a lot of those names come from our ideas of the planetary hour. So like Venus is in control of Friday. In French, Friday is vendredi. Saturday is Saturn's day. Sunday is the sun's day. And for Monday, we can also again look to the French, which is lundi in French. So now that we know all that, what does this mean for Chaucer's work? In the world of Chaucer, the stars control a myriad of actions in the characters' lives. Throughout many other tales, we see very specific astrological references. But for one, let's think about the Knight's Tale. So at the end of the Knight's Tale, when Palamon and Arcita are about to go to battle, they each go to a different temple in different directions to pray to very different gods. And their love interest, Emily, also goes to pray to a god at that time. And so if we look at the gods that they go to pray to, we can really dissect a lot about who they are as people. Also, Palamon and Arcita just going to the temples of Venus and Mars respectively just shows that like they are in fact very like deeply connected to the values of both Venus and Mars. And so that just goes to show that they probably do have some form of worship to these gods, or at least to these ideals. Another example of the gods controlling the story, or like being very present characters in the story, is when Chaucer's describing how Arcita shows up to battle the day of like his war with Palamon, and he says, "With Arcita in stories as men can find, came riding like the god of arms Mars." So that's just to show that like Chaucer's very directly saying that like in this moment Arcita looked like Mars. And also, speaking of Arcita, he goes to pray to Mars, which is the god of war. And really this battle is kind of set up in his favor because they go to battle on a Tuesday, and on Tuesdays it's Mars Day. Look at the French word mardi. And so, you know, he's doing what he should be doing as someone who is going to go to battle about someone. And he is praying to Mars for victory. And so from this, you can assume that, like, you can kind of read Arcita as a more violent individual than Palamon from this. You can also read him as a person who cares more about glory or about conquest. If you look at his actions even earlier in the tale, he completely forgets his friend and forsakes him, and then sooner or later doesn't even gets himself like a position. You know, he's a man who has contacts, who is kind of crafty in that way that you would think someone who is good at war is. And so this is very indicative of who he is as the person that he goes to go pray to Mars. And then if we look at Palamon, who goes to pray to the goddess Venus. And this is a lot about him also. He is about to go to battle. He is about to fight someone about love. And so in the end, he begins to pray for more love in his life. And I think that's paints him as somewhat more of a softer character than Arcita, or at least as more of a emotional character than Arcita is, just because of the god that he does pray to. But also, if we consider it, he has a line earlier in the book when he first sees Emily where he compares her to a goddess.
He says, "I knew not where she be a woman or goddess, but Venus is it soothly as I guess."
And basically he says that he has to look to Venus to disguise whether or not she is a goddess or a human woman. So throughout the entire tale, Palamon is just a child, a worshiper even, of the ideas of love and of Venus. Actually, there's this source that goes a lot into how throughout the tale, both Venus and Mars have very like strong hands on the narrative of the story.
Actually, if we really want to talk about astrological effects on the story, we really need to discuss how Saturn affects the Knight's Tale.
Saturn had a lot of negative attributes at the time. Saturn was in the sign of Leo, which at the time of Palamon and Arcita's battle signified really negative things like vengeance and drowning. And at that time, he was just a stronger, hardier, and more persistent than the other signs. And so Saturn being in the sign of Leo had a lot of very negative connotations attached to it. So basically, he was just ready to cause chaos in that moment. This was just a very bad time for Arcita to claim victory, because he didn't really pray to a very fortunate god either. So there's a lot of things stacked up against him in that way. Also, Saturn works as a kind of tiebreaker between Venus and Mars, who are essentially duking it out through the conflict between Palamon and Arcita. As soon as Arcita wins the battle, Venus goes to Saturn and she's just so distraught, and she says, how can you fix this? How dare you let my knight lose? To which he responds to her by saying, "Daughter, hold thy peace. Mars hath his will. His knight hath all his boon. And by men heed, thou shalt be essed soon." And basically this was his way of saying that Mars's knight got what he wanted. He won the battle, and so now I'm going to make it so that your knight can get what he wants and he can have love. And so Saturn in this passage has a really big deal when making sure the story turns out the way that it should, and also holding the characters to whatever fate that they're supposed to have. And so this is actually really interesting when you think about astrological forces working on the story, because this is very directly the planets having their own little side story and them duking it out through the actions of other people. And now lastly we look to Emily. Emily, she goes to pray to the goddess Diana, who is both the goddess of fertility and of marriage, and also of hidden things. And that's, I think, is the most interesting part about her as a character. Diana being the goddess of hidden things is a lot about Emily, because Emily has a lot of hidden desires probably, or just overlooked desires or thoughts that really aren't being considered as far as her part of the narrative goes. No one really ever asked her what she thinks or what she wants or who she wants to marry, and I feel like it shows her as a character who decides to seek solace in someone who would understand what she's feeling and expressing at this time. Also, Emily going to seek out the goddess of fertility and marriage could symbolize that Emily is somehow afraid to go into this part of her life where she will be married and she will be expected to have children, and so she is looking to a goddess who could help her overcome those challenges. And so in that way, Chaucer has woven astrology so deeply into a story where you can figure out these characters' wants and desires and also their personalities from them. Granted, we have, by the time of the battle, we've had an entire other 3 books to get to know them, but I think looking at them at the moment of battle, at the moment where the climax of the story and it's the most dire part of the tale, you can really understand where they are and how the stars fit into their lives. So, to wrap this up, Chaucer has a lot of astrological symbols and uses in his work. And I think these are here to both enrich the story and also to tell the story in a more deeper and better way. And if we look at them, we can discover so much about them. If we look to astrology, we can look to what the stars have to tell us and what we can tell the stars. And that's all I have for you in this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the universe.